Welcome to the Silicon Slopes Conversations. Today we're joined by Ben Hodson, who's the co-founder and CEO of JobNimbus. How are you?
Hey, great to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. So let's jump right in. I know you spoke at Summit, so I have an idea of what you guys do, but I think it's a cool story, and for anyone that's worked with contractors and knows their pain points, I think what you guys are doing is great. But founding story.
Yeah. I'm a longtime entrepreneur. JobNimbus is actually the 10th company I've started, 10. So, I mean, that sounds impressive on one level because I'm only 46, but actually that means a lot didn't work out. That's entrepreneur life, you know. But I'm learning everything I've learned through that, I'm using at JobNimbus, I think, to make the best one ever. I'm a software guy. Everything I've done is software my whole career. And I didn't really think about construction in general. I worked as a landscaper 1 year in high school, so I got a little bit of experience, and I said, well, this is a badly run business. That was my biggest memory of that time, you know? Like, we were always late. Every customer was always mad at us. That's all I remember, was trying to calm people down in between digging holes. And when I was, through a friend of a friend, I met up with some roofers, a roofing company, down in Colorado. There's a big group of roofers in Colorado. One of the reasons is that's a huge hail state, and hail damage causes a massive amount of problems to roofs. And we had a lunch. It was a totally different thing that day, but we had a lunch, and there was like 5 roofers there. And I'm talking to them, and this is embarrassing to say, but I hadn't made the connection. To me, entrepreneurship was much more about big companies and software. I know this sounds very naive, but that's where I was at. And I sat down with these guys, and they're talking about their business, and it occurred to me, this is embarrassing. Oh, they're entrepreneurs too. Wait, they have the exact same problem. It's a different scale, but they have the exact same problems I do. They just haven't figured out how to overcome some of the ones that I have. And I remember that. I remember also, man, I really like these people. They're super straight shooters. You cannot BS them, and they really were hurting. And this was 2012. And what I mean by that is the software in the industry at that time for, let's say, roofing construction, you had to install a server in your office. The only time they could connect to it was with their computer in the office. They're mostly in their truck all day driving around. And they don't know anything about maintaining software. Their servers are going down. It's embarrassing. They're the most non-technical type of people, right? And I realized that nobody in software that was good at software was trying to solve the problem of the average roofer in America. In fact, the greatest minds in America in technology were trying to figure out how to make Twitter run faster, which is a little embarrassing, but it was the truth, right? And so I said, wow, we're technology people. This is a really interesting problem. I just actually had my last company kind of fall apart, and I was looking for the next thing, and we got really excited about this. So we spent the next 6 months building out some basic CRM/project management tools for roofing companies. Now today, we're the #1 software for roofers in America, and we also do a lot about their home exterior contractors that use JobNimbus. But at the time, that was the starting point, was I found a really big problem. I found people that were in need, and they were willing to pay for the problem, and we just worked really, really hard. Now, there's a lot more to that story, but that's the nut that got us started.
Very cool, and spot on, great story. So as you're building it out, you're self-identified software guy. Don't swing a lot of hammers currently. How did you know what they wanted? Did you have like a group of contractors that were your test subjects?
Yeah, we actually took those 5 companies, and then they had some roofing buddies. And we actually had another company that was just doing gutters, another one that was doing like siding. They're all kind of grouped together because home exterior contractors sort of general for each other. Is kind of the way it works. And they mostly start with the roofer doing the main GCing on that, general contracting. And as we're going through that, we're realizing I don't even know what underlayment is. I don't know what a turtle vent is. I mean, guys, I took roofs for granted. I mean, there's a roof, whatever. Like, I'm a software guy, you know? And it was really interesting. So it's sort of out of necessity. We were massively customer driven from day one because we didn't even know. We're like, tell us how you work. Why would you do it that way? Oh, okay. Well, that might make a sense. Or actually, that's a terrible idea. You should do this. And we had a customer meeting every Monday morning. And we said, hey, it's a free version. It's a beta. You guys can use it for free. Just tell us what we should do each week. And they would get on the phone for an hour with us Monday mornings at 9 a.m. and tell us, this is what I like, this is what I didn't like, here's the newest features we're adding. And we did that for over 6 months. We just iterated. I got really good at roofing lingo, understanding contractors. And at the end of that time, people are going, maybe I shouldn't say this, but we would pay for this now. This is getting really cool. And so we came up with a model of how we could start charging for people, and they were our first 10 customers, actually.
Very cool. So if you're building a software company that sells to other software companies, you don't have that same hurdle of what is a shingle.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
How fun was that to see both worlds combining?
It was amazing. The biggest memory I have is the idea of seeing somebody get onto our software and they were so struggling in their business and seeing it just change. Like within a couple months, they're now hitting goals that they've never hit before. And I went, wow, we've got something really special. In fact, our mission is to make contractors heroes. And we started realizing we were changing people's lives. You can make huge impact on these small businesses. And that's super rewarding. That's really where the whole thing came from. Wow, this is even cooler than selling to another software company because we are changing people's lives.
Yeah, I can kind of just picture a contractor doing his taxes there's a tax guy in April, and tax guy says, oh, you made $150,000 more this year. Congrats.
Yeah. And they go, really?
And it's because they were using JobNimbus and optimizing their jobs.
Yeah, average company grows over 40% in revenue in the first 12 months with us. Pretty amazing.
Very cool. All right, so getting your first customers was kind of fun because you knew them for 6 months and then they opted to pay. What was your go-to-market strategy after that first group? How did it work?
Yeah, so if you think about just the business in general, just about the model, you've got really 2 stages, maybe 3, but the 2 main ones that we would focus on in this group would be your product market fit stage, where you're trying to find out, how do I get the features in the right way of my product to make it so that demand outstrips supply? That's the moment when you know you must switch. And there's actually a great book. It's an old book. It's called Crossing the Chasm. Have you ever read that book?
I have not.
Okay. It's Jeffrey Moore, I think, is the author. It's kind of fun to read these days because I think it was written in the late 80s, early 90s. And it's like, hey, the internet might be a big thing. It's looking like that's starting to take off. It's like, okay, this is cool, the mentality at the time. But one of the things he has is the idea that you go through a product market phase. And then once you find fit, you're actually the zone between product market fit and what's called go to market is called the chasm. And most companies don't make it through that. That's the most hard period. And where you know you're emerging from the chasm is if you can't ship enough product to keep up with customers, you are now ready to switch your organization around from more of the R&D early stage, keep costs tight, to ship as fast as possible, switch everything around to deliver product. And that was really what we were looking for in JobNimbus, was when we started seeing more customers buying than we could even onboard or handle. And that basically happened the end of 2019, early 2020. We finally emerged out of PMF and just started exploding.
Yeah, and so you've got the traditional ways of marketing, which there's a lot. But I would imagine the easiest and best for you is when a contractor recommends it to their friend.
Referrals are great.
Referrals.
Yep. We get a lot of people coming through all kinds of sources. Trade shows are still really good. This industry still works about 15 to 20 years in the past in terms of, this is a number that will shock you. More than 50% of home exterior contractors in America are running their business on paper still. Now, might have an Excel spreadsheet if they're really good, but they're on paper. And so if you're dealing with that, you actually can use some of the old marketing tactics, like mailers still work for these people. It's crazy stuff that most times you wouldn't even think about. But I love that because we had to get creative. And how do we reach people that are non-technical, that aren't searching on Google? And so we have all kinds of cool account-based marketing things that we do, and mailers and events that we connect with people. And then as we're seeing the demographic shift of younger owners in, let's say, roofing, you're seeing more and more people search online. So those more modern tools are starting to work even more and more.
Yeah, because the younger generation is seeing that a few of the older ones are making more money than they used to, and they might want to do it as well, right?
One of the interesting things about this crossing the chasm thing, when you emerge from the chasm and you go to market, your customer actually, so those early adopters are who you're selling to in the PMF, product market fit stage, but the late adopters, the people that are actually ready to scale big, they want to hear a different pitch. The early adopters want to hear the pitch of like, you can get a competitive advantage with this software, it's got some bugs, but it's going to be incredible, and they're willing to take the risk. The late adopters are not. They actually want to hear you say things like, we're the number one in the industry, we have the most integrations, this is the safest place to be, if you're going to pick one, this is the one to go with. That's the kind of pitch that they want. And so actually we had to change our marketing around as we emerged from the PMF stage as well.
Yeah, so with that, what you just mentioned, you sell to Ma and Pa.
Yep.
But then as you've grown, you need to switch to a big, maybe multi-state roofing contractor.
That's exactly right. Like the number one roofer in America uses JobNimbus, and they're gigantic. They have 27 states that they're in. So
very cool. And so that's a different sales pitch. Do you handle those still, or how have you built your team to handle the different verticals?
We have an emerging enterprise team right now. Like by the end of this quarter, it should be really dialed in. But most deals still, if they're really, really big companies, I'm usually involved. I was just on a call last week. I feel like that's one of my jobs as a great CEO should be the best salesman in the company always. And so if it's a high value client that I can help move the needle, I'm going to be involved in that. We'll still have a sales rep too.
Yeah. So how many iterations are you guys doing now on the product versus the early days? Like, I'm sure there's still people saying, I don't like this.
Yeah.
You should do that. How's that process evolved?
Yeah, and it's really hard because unlike a lot of software, we're not a point solution, we're a platform. And that's so hard to get to a platform state. It's great power, you have great lock-in, but it also is a product nightmare because you have so many features and then you can overcomplicate the product and actually cause major problems for your growth. So it's always a balancing act. We try to spend about half our time on existing features, just improving the experience, and the other half of the time on new features to gain market share or reduce churn or whatever. You know, we just have some strategy around the product.
Yeah. So a lot of founders and CEOs aren't technical. You are.
Yeah.
How into the weeds do you get on the technical side?
I had to figure out a way around this because I love coding. And I'm the kind of guy that, man, if I start coding, I'll like 12 hours and, I haven't eaten at all, you know, I haven't slept in a day. Like I get obsessive about I love it. And it gets you because it's the dopamine response. Every time you compile and then something is better, like, oh, my brain just liked that, and you go again. So I went to the University of Washington. I got a degree in business, and I got a second degree in computer software systems science. And so I was a coder, but also I was a business guy. I played both hats, but I have definitely switched much more to the tech business side over the last 10 years. Just code on the weekends sometimes now.
Okay, so still get that dopamine rush.
Yeah, but I massively care about our product and what's happening there. Strong opinions about it, let's say.
And like your developers can't pull the wool over your eyes either, right?
Not usually. Yeah, we have good people that wouldn't do that anyways.
They wouldn't do it anyways,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
we've all been there. It's like,
Yeah.
no, that's not possible. Okay. But
I'm
you know it is,
I'm
right?
probably worse for that than anybody because I'm so used to being scrappy and just figuring stuff out that when people come to me and say, we have to rewrite something, it's just always a no. I'm like, no, figure out how to make it work. And developers don't love that because they want perfect, clean code. But the truth is, even if you looked under the hood of somebody like Salesforce.com, like gigantic software, tons of tech debt, tons of stuff glued together, you're just always trying to manage the tech debt as you get bigger. Every line of code you make is new tech debt over time. So.
Yeah. And so you mentioned you started with roofers, but now a lot of exterior parts of a home.
Yep.
What does the product on the software and the platform side look like for those new lines of business? Do you have to switch things up a lot? Do you have to change things, or do you just use the same platform in general?
We got so lucky, and I wish this was a strategy, but it wasn't. We just got lucky. We didn't know anything about roofing, like I said. So we're like, well, how should we do the steps in the process flow to get to an estimate or to get to a signed contract? I don't know. I guess we should just make a tool that you can customize. So we went really big on customization from day one because we're showing stuff to customers like, that doesn't work. Oh, cool. I can just switch that right in the software. Nothing's hard-coded. And all our competitors were sort of roofing companies or whatever that started making software, and they have one way to do it. And if you like their way, it maybe works good. But if you want customization, you come to JobNimbus. And certainly that's why the big companies come to us all the time, getting more and more of those every day. So as we moved into other industries, it turned out to be like this happy accident that we were very customizable for fencers or pool companies or whatever it was. And then we have templates that are just built in for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, one less thing to worry about.
Yeah, exactly.
Happy accident. Very good. All right, so you mentioned at the beginning this is 10th time down the road.
Yeah.
There's been some good ones and some bad ones. As a serial entrepreneur, have you repeated any of the mistakes you made previously in JobNimbus, or do you have systems to ensure that does not happen?
I feel like I'm making less mistakes every year. I will say that. But there are a lot of things that I just, you get in the weeds so much and you get so busy on things that you make simple errors. For instance, just basic alignment of problems, like your board is not on the same page as you, or your employees think that you're trying to accomplish something that you're not, or vice versa. So every time I've said something 10 times, say it again, because it's all about over-communicating. A great CEO over-communicates to everybody all the time. And so I had to get a lot better at actually learning how to communicate. How could I make an idea really simple? How could I make it visual? How could I use analogies? I'm a huge fan of analogies because people remember stories more than they remember anything. Customer stories, that sort of thing. That's one area where I feel like I've consistently made mistakes over the years. I went to war with boards and stuff. Terrible idea. Never do that, So now I go overboard to try to build a better relationship. One mistake I think I've done a lot is, because I massively care about people. You probably know about the impossible question, entrepreneurs' impossible question of which do you care about more, your customers or your employees, right? And it's an impossible question because you care about both. Now, you learn a lot about a CEO from what they answer, and I would answer as employees. Because of that, I always wait too long to fire somebody because, in fact, if I had everybody raise I guess everybody in here would probably say I've waited too long to fire somebody in my career. Because I care about people, and I always try, and I always hope. But I've learned more of okay, as soon as you see these signs, Ben, it's not worth going the extra 3 months. Instead, we actually switched the company around. And one of the things I'm really proud of, if you were to get terminated at JobNimbus, you would have multiple interviews already set up with other companies that we had facilitated for you and referrals. That's crazy. I hadn't heard of anybody else doing that, but we do that. We just had an employee leave 2 weeks ago, and he just got a new job, and it was all because of the interviews we set up. So we care about our people, but if they're not working out here, we don't not care about them anymore. We try to move them on. Anyways, long story short, I think I've waited too long to fire people a lot of times.
Gotcha. And that's cool that you have a good exit strategy for folks. So you're the only one that has done all 10, right? There's nobody else on your team that was with you in each one of those 10. So when you kind of have the sixth sense, you just feel it, right? Because again, you're the only one that can have all that information.
Yeah.
And it's just you're feeling it. How do you communicate to others on your team of I've seen this before? You mentioned over communicating, but how do you communicate to them I've seen this before and it didn't go well. Let's not repeat it.
Yeah. My first company was a screaming success, and that was the worst thing that could have happened to me in my life. It seems crazy to say that, because then I thought I had it all figured out. And my next two companies were a total disaster because I was running playbooks and it wasn't working. And what I realized is the principles are the same, but everything is so complex, the customers and the employees and the market segment and external forces, that you have to just relearn. And so the secret is actually to not ever think that you know what the answer is, but to learn how to learn fast. And that's what I've really tried to develop, is not, to my team, it's not, no, I've seen this before, we got to do it this way. I don't usually say that. Instead, I say, well, this is what I've seen before. I'm very skeptical of this. Let's run a test on this. And we're really testing mentality at the company. There's a book by Alberto Savoia called The Right It. And I love that book. We actually make every employee read it. Highly recommend. He was at Google. And you've always, probably a lot of you guys have read Eric Ries's book, The Lean Startup. It's a classic. If you haven't, you should totally read it. But one of the things the Lean Startup doesn't do is oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense as you read it. But then how exactly do I do the testing? Alberto Savoia's gotcha. That's the right it. Exactly the process to do the test. And I believe the companies that learn the fastest win the fastest. So most of my conversations with employees are mostly about show me the data, what test did we run to know if this is true? Because I don't take anything for granted. Everything is a different problem set.
Yeah, so along those lines, you are the CEO, still wearing a few hats, but not as many as in the early days.
Yeah, we're almost at 200 employees now, so it's a little easier.
Getting some help
Yep.
across the various functions. But I believe your job's still not run out of money.
Yep.
Chief product officer, chief sales guy, and cheerleader, obviously, a morale booster. How do you kind of let go of some of those responsibilities and trust your team? And what are some things that strictly you're going to be you, whether it's the board, fundraising, whatever?
Yeah. I think for me, it comes down to three things, and it doesn't mean that I don't care about other things in the company, but if any one of these things is off, we are in big trouble. It's product, it's sales, and it's culture. And if all three of those in place, even if you have other problems in the company, like finance has an issue or whatever, your BI tool sucks or something, you can still win. If any one of those three is off, it's going to slow you down. If two of them are off, you're headed for disaster. So I focus a lot of my time around those three areas. And when I say culture, that comes to a lot of communication. Setting the vision, making super clear. This may sound aggressive. I love it. I'm going to do this in every company going forward. We do a weekly company all hands. And it's only 30 minutes. It's super fast. And we do them in different themes. So one week's a product week where we show the newest features. Another week's customer stories week where we show videos of customers talking about how we've impacted them, and so forth. And the same thing with that. I never let a week go by that I don't communicate to the board all the key metrics, my assessment of it. And then, of course, we have monthly check-ins with the board, calls, and then quarterly. And that's just baseline. And still, Gary, we have people say, oh, I didn't realize we were doing that. It's like, okay. Like, that's how much you have to over-communicate to make sure that everybody's on the same. If you think about it, it's a logistical nightmare to run a company because you're trying to herd hundreds of cats into a box, and some cats are going all over the place. And so you just got to keep herding. That's the power of a great CEO, I think, is the ability to align everybody around a vision.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of the same problems as a lot of the other guests.
Yes.
Herding kittens with mittens. But it's also fun, right?
Love it.
Yeah. Yeah, we send out onboarding emails for events or summit speaking, and it's like in bold, please read the entire email. If you do, it's going to go much better. And you can always tell somebody only read half the email. So you can over-communicate until you're blue in the face, but there's still going to be some hurting involved. All right, so you mentioned culture a few times, and it sounds like you guys have a great one. It's always been important, but in 2022, at least in this little ecosystem of ours, extremely important because it's a fairly frothy job market out there.
Intense.
Lots of opportunities, lots of pay raises and reasons to leave, right? So how are you and your team managing that?
Everybody talked about the great, what do they call it? The great resignation. Thank you. I kept thinking recession, but that's not happening yet. Thank God. And we didn't have that happen at our company. And I kept hearing CEO friends tell me that. So I'm like, wait, you're losing all those people. We're not losing those. I thought, what is going different? And I really analyzed it. We do two things I think that made a huge difference for us. Number one, culture is king. People stay at places even if there's a better offer, as long as it's in the right zone, if the culture is great. And if they feel like they're doing something meaningful with their lives. And so the job has to go well beyond money. It's got to go to every day I come in and do something that I feel like makes the world a better place. And I feel that in my soul. And so now you're going to have to not only give me the right offer letter with the right money, but you're also going to have to convince me how I'm going to make a bigger difference in the world than where I'm doing right now. That's a tall order for a lot of companies to steal you away. Because we're getting people recruited all the time, but they're sticking around. And the second thing we did, and this is extremely aggressive, but we actually have a compensation team and what we call our people experience department. By the way, we don't use the word HR or human resources in our company. If you want to be shocked, the first coining of the term HR is from the book 1984 by George Orwell, talking about humans as resources. It's terrifying that corporate America adopted that word. We do not use that word. We use people experience. These are real people, and it's their experience moving through the company. And in our PX team, they have a compensation group, and we review comp for all of our employees on a quarterly basis. And if we see that somebody's value is higher in the market, we just go to them and say, you got a raise, here it is. They don't have to ask us, we're on top of it. Now, if they do get offers or they do get recruited or they see something, they can come to that team and let them know. We'll evaluate and we'll say, yeah, you're totally worth more. It's capitalism 101. If we want to retain that person, we got to pay what they're worth, and the market dictates what their value is, whether we think the salaries are high or not. Now, that does put a lot of pressure on our overhead, but it also has retained some key people that we would have lost otherwise, and we're winning because of our people.
Yeah. That's a lot of innovation and strategic thought into people innovation, or experience, sorry.
People experience, yeah.
I think the people experience folks across the world, this has been one of the busiest times of their career.
100%.
And depending on what market it's probably not going to end anytime soon because it's pretty robust out there.
Most people define culture, I think, when I've talked to people, this is what they say, like, the company had a really cool culture because we had Xbox in the hall or whatever, you know. Or company had a really cool culture because we had a pizza party every Friday, or we were winning. And I think that's how people define, I actually define culture as how you talk about the company when you're not at the company. What do you say about JobNimbus when you're not at work? That's probably what our culture really is at some level. But we think of culture as much more deep than that. It's actually about doing meaningful work with people that you like, and it's about accomplishing a mission together and making the world a better place in a way that you can't normally do on your own. That causes us to do a lot more cultural-related things at our company than I think I've ever done before. Certainly, this is the best culture I've ever created so far.
Yeah, that's great. And the ROI is there, right?
Yeah, and we're winning because of it.
Yeah.
But if you're losing, that'll tell you how your culture really is, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great indicator.
Yep.
So you guys are a tech company, obviously, but your consumers swing hammers and buy shingles, and that's impacted by a much bigger macro economy, right? Do you and your team worry about interest rates and supply chain as it could eventually trickle to you, right?
Yeah. The beauty is the money is so cheap right now. There's so much money on the sidelines that everybody's doing home improvement projects regardless. And that's actually causing even more strain on the supply chain system. It's a huge problem. If you would ask any of our customers, they would put it in their top 3 biggest issues is trying to get materials right now. That being said, there's a lot of great supplier partners that we have, and they've got good things in the works. It will ease up. Like even later this year, you'll see this problem dissipate largely. Interest rates aren't as big of an issue right now because there's so much money on the sidelines that it doesn't actually matter in the short term. It could be a big problem long term. We'll see what the Fed does, but right now we're not as concerned about that as other things.
Yeah, so let's take a time machine. Let's say JobNimbus was founded in 2006 and had 2 or 3 years of runway, and then there was a great recession. What would be some of the levers you'd pull and buttons you'd push to kind of mitigate that 3 or 4 year rough patch?
Yeah. One thing, I like running a quote-unquote real business, and what I mean by that is either running profitably or running within profitability range. So I like to keep burn. If you're going to burn, and the only reason to burn is if you're trying to grow faster and you see an opportunity to capitalize on, right? But if you're going to burn, I like to see burn within 12 to 18 months. And we're SaaS, so this is how I think about it. If we just stop hiring right now and button down the hatches, we don't have to fire anybody, and we would catch back up to profitability in 12 to 18 months or whatever. That's a safe, smart move. We can still burn, but even in a recession, you're going to recover. You know. Now, we got people in this area that are burning 5 years ahead right now, and they're headed for disaster if something goes wrong. The other benefit that we have that's just lucky in this industry is we're in repair and remodel primarily. And even in 2008, your roof leaked, you still got it repaired. And so whereas new construction dropped to 90%, repair and remodel only dropped about 30% at its worst time. So we can weather the storm, but we try to be smart about the cash flow because that's the #1 driver of whether we survive bad times.
Yeah, well thought out. That was a great answer, and it's applicable to a company like yours, and I think there's a lot that have made mistakes and burnt 5 years ahead and they just disappear. So very cool. I only have 1 or 2 more questions, so audience, get ready. Don't be shy with your questions. Obviously, just talking to you, you're passionate and you're enjoying it. We were talking about guitars earlier.
Yeah.
and you have the same glow about building this company as you do guitars, which is
yeah.
unique. So what's coming down the chute? You guys are obviously scaling and growing with employees, culture, all of that, but what's the next year and a half look like for you guys?
So transitioning into a go-to-market company takes multiple cycles and years, so we're still doing that. There's still other parts that are still running more like a startup in the company. So that's one thing, it's just structural things that need to get done. But over the next year and a half, we're gonna hire a ton of people, so we had to make sure all of our PX was in place. One concern, we hired over 140, well, we hired 141 people last year, something like that. Crazy. How do you handle that? Well, we had a good process to hire, and we actually had a very high retention rate from that. One of the side effects, suddenly now we have no management team. Like we have executives and then a ton of line level employees. So we had to build middle level management. That was last year's goal. Now this year we're going, crap, now we need a senior level between the executive and the management. Otherwise we can't handle the growth we're gonna have this year. So you're dealing with like big structural issues that somebody that is more in the startup mindset wouldn't even have to worry about right now. It's just sort of like opening up the kimono of other problems we have. The other thing is, like, we have a lot of TAM, total addressable market, to go in roofing, home exteriors, and that sort of thing. But our idea is to go beyond just the software solution for these customers. They have problems with running their payroll. They've got problems with, like, half of the people we talk to don't even have a website, or they've got like a GoDaddy landing page. Are you gonna buy from a roofer that you can't even find them online? It's embarrassing, you know? So we wanna provide more services around that and really build an overall package. It still fits into our mission of making them heroes. And by the way, we define that as like they get more time with their kids or their grandkids. They can buy that cool boat they always wanted. They can build that vacation house. They can be the #1 roofer in Lehi, Utah. That's making them heroic. We want them to make the hero of their own story. So we're really just focused around how we can add services to make that work.
That's great, and it's always fun when there's a mission behind it and that you guys are supporting a really cool, great group of people, like you said, straight shooters.
They're awesome.
They're fun to talk to. Cool. All right, let's open it up. Questions in the audience? It's always the trickiest one, the first one right there. Wait for the microphone.
How did you handle the challenge of enablement with hiring 140 employees in one year?
And when you say enablement, do you mean like training new hires?
Getting them up to speed,
Yep.
job descriptions, getting them onboarded and
Great question.
Contributing?
There's a lot of factors, but let me point out a couple. I wish I would have known sooner, so maybe you guys can take this and run with it, but I am a huge fan of the book Who, W-H-O. I think it's Jeff Smart with a G, Jeff Smart. And one of the things that he talks about is the deep interviewing process, where you go multiple levels deep. You don't take their first answer, but you ask why, and you dig down 5 whys on things. And then he's really big on scorecards. I love scorecards. So before a role can even be hired at JobNimbus, the manager must put together a scorecard that's approved by our PX team. And that scorecard needs to have a job description, which is usually where people stop. We actually have a section for attributes, like what type of person are we looking for? What kind of personality traits would they have? And then we have a section for the 30, 60, 90 day. This is how you know if you're doing a great job in your job or you're missing. And those have to have numbers, metrics. Every employee owns a number at JobNimbus. That's a core rule. So you start there, and then you filter first. Our first interview is a filter on culture and values. We have 5 company values that we filter for, because you won't like it at JobNimbus if you don't have our values. You'll love it. It'll be the best job ever if you do. So then once we get through that, then we do the scorecard match, and then it's a skill interview, and then we go to offer if it's the right candidate. So that you got to filter right in the right process, and we use the who method in our deep interviewing throughout that. Now, once the person starts, the first day, so one of my, my favorite CEO of all time, like my hero CEO, is Andy Grove. That may not be a name a lot of younger people know. Andrew Grove was one of the co-founders and CEO of Intel during their most successful period. In fact, if you heard of OKRs or you're using OKRs, Andy came up with that. That's his idea. He is an extreme business innovator. But that's not even why I respect him so much. I love innovation. But I think most people I've asked this question to, like, who's the best CEO? And they always say Steve Jobs. Fine, that's fine. But the problem I have with that is Steve is good at certain things, and of course I didn't know him, but from what my perception was, most people that worked for him were terrified of him, had psychological abuse, okay? Andy Grove, this is why I love him. Every person that worked for Andy said, you made me better. I wouldn't be the person I am without having worked for Andrew Grove. He leveled people up. And so I refuse to believe that a great CEO needs to be a jerk. I actually think it's the exact opposite. It's about growing and leveling people up, and you can be super successful. So why do I say all that? Well, one of the things Andy Grove did, even when they were hiring hundreds of thousands of people at Intel, he would meet with every employee on the first day in a group, and he would talk about the vision of the company, what we're trying to do, and drive alignment from day one. I did the same thing. I didn't even know he did this until recently, but I've been doing this for years. Every group of new hires, every other week we have a new hire group come in. I meet with them for their first hour and tell them about the founding story, what we're trying to do as a company, why they're here is so important. I tell them customer stories, and I tell them where we're going, what the goal is as a company. It's great alignment, and it's a very popular thing because most people are like, wait, the CEO is here talking to me? There's only 4 people in this onboarding group. Yeah, everybody matters. The second thing is then we have what's called the Learning Lab, because one of the things I'm super struggled with my whole career, how do you make employees care as much about customers as you do? How do you build that empathy? And so we actually built a Learning Lab room on our top floor. And it's got a roof in there, it's got gutters, it's got siding, it's got a solar setup. We built a little office desk for what it's like to be an office manager in our company, or customer company. We built another desk for the people that do the scheduling and material ordering. We built a little kitchen table where you have to sell the homeowner. And you as an employee actually go in and do everything on paper, every job of the customer. You stand up on the roof and you take photos and you put together an estimate and you learn what it feels like to be them. And then you do everything with JobNimbus, and you see how much faster and easier and better life is. And then when you're on the phone with customers, you're like, I kind of have been there now. Because you can't teach somebody to be a roofer, but you can make them feel what it feels like to be a roofer. So that's day 2. And then the rest of that 2 week is very structured learning that they learn around the company. And then the second week's a lot more about their specific job. So it's a very intensive first 2 weeks at JobNimbus before you're actually on the floor with your team doing the job, and then there's ongoing training from there. Most people report it's the best onboarding they've had at any company so far, so we're doing something right. There's always things we're tweaking on all the time.
That's amazing. Right there in the back. And then Karen, can you take a picture for social media? I think we might have forgotten that. Thank you.
Hi, I wanted to ask, what is your total addressable market, and are you seeing yourself primarily in the U.S., or do you have international aspirations? And then secondly, how have you funded your business and the growth? Is this bootstrapped, or have you raised outside capital?
Yeah, great questions. So our TAM, if you just look at, let's say, home exteriors, roofing, siding, gutters, windows and doors, solar, our TAM is over 500 million. And half of these people are still using paper, so there's a lot of room to grow, right? How we funded. I have raised a lot of money in my career, and with this one, we really want to do bootstrap. So in 2012, myself and my partner Nick put all our savings into the company, and I've had some successes in the past, and so we put that money in and started growing on that. And by 2015, we're running out of that money, but I will tell you, you never want to raise money when you need it. You want to raise money when you're trying to grow with it. Like, if you want to retain ownership of your company. Like, I've raised money when I need it, and I went from 55% ownership to 5% ownership, and that was a good deal, honestly, because we weren't going to survive otherwise. And when they know they got you, the term sheets get really crummy. So you want to be in the pole position if you want to still run your company and have massive say in it, by actually having a growth motion that you're telling, this is how we're going to make more money and grow with it. And so when did that happen for JobNimbus? We just suffered through 2015, 2016, 2017. It was tough. Like, we were doing crazy things to move money around. We always paid everybody first, and then we would live off of whatever was left. Some months I was living off $500, It's like enough for food and gas. Crazy, crazy stuff. But we knew what we were doing. We wanted to get there. And by 2019, we're starting to emerge. We're really getting big growth. And so in 2020, I'd already been courting investors for about a year. we took $53 million on our Series A, and we retained control of the company, and that's unheard of at that size of money in our space. But we did it at the right time where it was all about the growth. And so those investors are like, oh yeah, the company's valuation is so much higher, let's put it in. So we're on that path right now. That's a lot of money to use. We're, a year and a month into that. So we're just trying to be wise about that huge amount of capital.
I'm a first-time entrepreneur.
Awesome.
And it feels like there's a million things that need to get done and things to address and things to become an expert in. What would you say the top 2 or 3 things that as a founder CEO you need to become an expert in to have success?
So learning's my number one, and if you haven't read The Write It, you should read it, because that will teach you how to win in almost any business. Learn your way into success, because there's no such thing as a playbook that gets you there every time, right? Number 2, learn psychology, because most of being a leader of people is learning how to manage people and how to, so think about this. We got almost 200 people in our company that all have different priorities in their life, different things pulling them away. How do you get them all focused on the mission of the company? And you're juggling. It's a constant balance. You're always trying to I think of it this way, since I love music and I used to play in a band. It's like we took money and we went on tour with a record label now. And we're on tour, and the keyboardist is pissed, and the guitar player says that they gotta have red M&Ms only in their room, or we can't, I got to just cater to everything to keep the band together so we can do the tour all the way to the end of the tour, and then we're all going to look back and be really proud of the tour, best tour ever. But it's just like a band. You're just trying to keep everybody together. So a lot of people management, psychology. And in fact, one book in particular I'll recommend is called Persuasion. Not Persuasion, Persuasion. It's the psychology of, oh man, I can't remember the subtitle. Anyways, awesome book on understanding how the tactics of how people convince others, and then also how you can use them wisely and with good intent and not manipulate people. And then the only other thing, I feel like I wish I would have spent more time on understanding the business model of how it works. So that's why I talked about product market fit and then analyzing the business all the time to think about go-to-market and where am I at? And I would highly recommend Crossing the Chasm. It's a good way to just understand how a business model works. But I think if you can do that, then you can think strategically, because otherwise you get sucked into the weeds. And the last thing I'll tell you is it doesn't get any less busy or any more things that pull you away. It just gets different problem set the bigger you get. And so I do an exercise every single day that helps me a lot. I mean, I do meditation, and at the end of my meditation, I visualize my tasks for the day, what I'm trying to accomplish as my goal, and I make sure that I think about where I'm going to be, how am I going to feel, who's going to be around me when I accomplish that goal, and I better feel a sense of elation. If I don't, I'm working on the wrong thing. And then the number 2 is, what's the biggest thing I could do that would move the needle on JobNimbus today? And every other task goes below that. And you should know where you have the most willpower. A lot of people it's mornings, a lot of people it's evenings. Almost nobody I've met is midday. And wherever you have the most willpower, schedule that task. Get that done. You will move the needle more than anything else, because everything else is minutia compared to the biggest thing.
Very cool. This has been fun and enlightening. It's always nice when people remember the books they've read, which you've done a great job at.
I'm a big fan of books. I read 60-something books last year, on business alone. So
it's a quick and fairly affordable way to learn a bunch of stuff. Thank you so much, Ben, for being here. We really appreciate it, and congrats on all that you and your team have done.
Thanks for having me.
You bet.